Hello, small group leaders. Welcome to our Pearlside Small Group Leaders podcast, where we help you lead your small group. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
I'm Pastor Tim, and joining me today is our
Pastor
main
Kalae.
campus pastor, Pastor Kalae George.
Come on.
And we are excited because this is the new year, and we start every new year fasting and praying, and we don't just do it locally as a church, but we do it globally with our Every Nation family. So next week is Seek Week, and small group leaders, we want to encourage you to rally your small groups into our Seek Week. For more information, you can go to our website, and you can see all the different prayer pockets, and also there's resources there for you. So pearlside.org/Seek Week for more information. And we do realize that some of you, though, aren't able to attend Seek Week because maybe you meet in a different night. And that's why we do have the discussion guide. But before we go into our guide, there is a reminder. If you are an LG coach, we have our important LG coaches training happening Saturday, February 2nd. So if you haven't registered yet, please register. This is one of the few meetings we do in the year where we gather you coaches to equip you, inspire you, and so that we can get better at leading our small group leaders. And if you didn't receive a RSVP link, please notify your LG pastor.
Yeah,
all right. Well, Pastor Kalae, can you lead us through the main thought of this guide?
Yeah, well, we are starting a brand new series along with our Every Nation family of churches called The Cross. And the whole premise of this series is that we're going to look at different characters in the Bibles and their interactions with the cross and how their view of Jesus definitely radically changed their life. And we're going to, in this first volley, look at a man named Nicodemus. And he was a religious person who had a lot of knowledge of Jewish customs, a lot of knowledge of Jewish traditions. And then he has an inquiry about Jesus, and so he visits him at night. And in the story of Nicodemus, we see like a faith journey and a progression that many of us in our lives will move to in our growing in our faith. And so here's the main thought. It says, faith is a journey that begins with curiosity, grows through moments of confusion, and leads to clarity and total commitment. Nicodemus' encounter with Jesus shows us how each stage of faith invites us to respond to Jesus and the cross. And so we break down basically 4 different stages. And because we're a preacher, we got to use the C's.
Yes.
And so the first stage is curiosity. The next stage is confusion, moves on to clarity, and then finally commitment. And Nicodemus, his life really progresses through these different stages. He visits Jesus at night, and there's significance in that because he was a part of the Jewish Sanhedrin. He didn't want to be associated with Jesus. And so he visits him at night in a moment where not too many people are having conversations with Jesus. And then he strikes a conversation with Jesus. And I'm appreciative of this because his interaction with Jesus gives us the famous verse in all of Scripture. John 3:16 comes out of a response to Jesus's conversation with Nicodemus. And so curiosity is where faith begins. Nicodemus approaches Jesus at night, and he has questions and curiosities. And a lot of people start there in their faith. They're curious about Jesus. They've heard about him. They've had maybe some level of experience. And most people start in this journey of faith with just a level of curiosity. I remember for me, in my faith journey, I was invited to Pearlside Church, but I grew up in a Pentecostal church. And so just the invitation to come and check out a church, I was open to it. And that experience was life-changing because I saw people my age really passionate about Jesus. And I never saw that before in all of my life. And so there was a curiosity that I've been in church all of my life, but I've never seen people really passionate, and that gave me a curiosity to see what is missing in my life that they have. And so that led me in a spiritual journey. And for many people, their journey in faith begins with some level of curiosity. What would you say about that, Pastor Tim?
Yeah, I think, I know I'm jumping the gun a little bit, but it's really cool when you think about Jesus telling Nicodemus that you must be born again.
Yep.
And Pastor Kalae, you just had your first child a few years ago, and I have 4 kids.
You have a lot of kids.
And I remember, like, each of my children's birth is different, the process.
It's true.
Even though they're both from my wife and I, so same DNA and everything, but the way they were born and the delivery was different.
That's huge.
And so for curiosity, I think it's really good because for some people, they have different kind of questions or different hurdles, different things that they're looking into and what's drawing them to God. And so I think that's really encouraging for us as small group leaders, just to understand that when people come to us to join our small groups and they're in our groups, that for us not to compare one person to another person, because we all start differently and at different places.
And then curiosity transitions into confusion, where a lot of people have questions or face challenges. And for Nicodemus, Jesus changes the conversation and basically starts talking about being born again, like you mentioned. And the thing I love about Nicodemus is that he asked two questions, and it wasn't a why question, but it was a how question, meaning how can this be? How can someone be born again? And so oftentimes in our journey of faith, there's a lot of questions that come up that we have about God, about Jesus, about the scriptures and things like that. And the thing I love about Jesus is that he doesn't shy away from our questions, but he actually invites us to pursue him in the midst of our questions. And a lot of times in life, in our faith journey, there's going to be things that happen in our life that throw us off track and gets us confused. But in the midst of our confusions and our questions, Jesus is inviting us to keep on pursuing him in the midst of that. And I've heard it said this way, that faith isn't the absence of questions, but continuing to pursue God with your questions. And so for Nicodemus, he leaves this conversation a little bit confused, but something happened along the way, and that we pick up the story in John chapter 7, where he went from confusion to clarity, and faith leads to understanding. And so we see him having a conversation with the Sanhedrin. They were trying to really persecute Jesus, and he saw their hypocrisy, and he ends up standing up for Jesus and speaking for him. And this is the first instance where, since the conversation that he has with Jesus, Nicodemus begins to publicly defend Jesus in front of his colleagues. And that's where we progress in our faith journey, is that we start to proclaim who we believe him to be, not just for ourselves, but we start to proclaim him publicly, where we start to speak out about what we believe about Jesus, who he is, and we have a confidence that begins to emerge as we have a deeper understanding of who God is in the faith journey. And then finally, we see here a commitment where faith requires surrender. At the ending of the story of Jesus, once he is crucified, he is buried, a key person that was a part of his burial was Nicodemus. And the thing about him is he reveals where he's at spiritually with what he brings to the table. He goes and helps Joseph of Arimathea, which is what we're going to look at in another of these weeks. But he helps him bury Jesus, and he doesn't come empty-handed, but he comes with 75 pounds of spices and myrrhs to help with the burial process. And I researched this, that the average person would have about 5 pounds of things given to them in their burial, and a king would have about 75 pounds. And so Nicodemus, in the amount that he brought to honor Jesus, was recognizing that Jesus wasn't just any old guy, but Jesus was actually who he claimed to be, the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. And so
That's
he
powerful.
comes to a level of commitment, surrendering his life. He doesn't come empty-handed, and the amount that he brought was equivalent to about $200,000 in money given to honor Jesus at his burial. So when everyone else, all the disciples flee, Joseph and Nicodemus are standing with Jesus, helping him bury Jesus in a moment of boldness. And so we see these 4 levels in our faith journey. And for us, maybe we're at different levels. And as small group leaders, we have to assess where people are at in their journey. And we have a few questions here that will help you navigate this part. Pastor Tim, take it away from here.
Yeah, so of course we always start off with looking at what stands out to, from going through the main thought with our people. And I think that's good, because from there, as people reply, small group leaders, you already get a gauge of where people are at. I know, many of us, we already have a good idea, but this is such a great discussion to really unpack. And see where each individual member is at. And so even this general question of opening it up, what stands out to you, I think, we're gonna begin to see a little bit more deeper in where people are at with their faith journey with Christ. And so I just want to point that out, just jumping off a little bit more of what you said, Pastor Kalae, is that we are all in different parts of our faith journey. We never really reach a point where we have arrived. But we're constantly growing in faith. And so the main thing I want to say, small group leaders, to remind us all, as we shepherd the people in our group is faith is not an on-off switch.
That's good.
It's not like, okay, this guy has faith and this guy doesn't have faith. We are all like have either a little faith or a lot of faith, and we're growing in that faith.
Yeah. That's true. And then these questions will help you to really assess where people are at. You can start sharing your faith journey. The first is what's initially sparked your curiosity about Jesus. And for some of us, maybe you've been a part of the church for a long time. You can revisit your faith journey on how you began there. And then you can hear people's faith journey as well. We can talk about confusing times in our life where we question God. And maybe we went through seasons of difficulty and seeing really how we navigated through that, and we can encourage one another in those moments. And then the last question I love is that, at the start of the year, what level of commitment are we going to give God in the first week of the year? What is God calling us to surrender? Surrender is an ongoing process. It's not just a one and done thing, but it's a constant giving up things. And so for all of us, it's a great opportunity for us to really share things that God is putting on our hearts to surrender, to give a greater level of commitment to Him in this new year. So this is a really great opportunity for us to really project how we are going to believe God for and respond to the cross this new year, 2025.
That's great. Pastor Kalae, going back to the third question about this confusion and navigating, you said a quote that was really good. I'd like you to repeat it again, that faith is not the absence of questions,
but it's the pursuing of God in the midst of your questions.
That is so good. And, small group leaders, one of the things I do when I lead my small group, it's like because small groups is the most important ministry in our church. We believe in it, and it's which we build our church off of, not off the stage and the platform, but in our small group discussions. This is a good time to really encourage your people that are in group. I know it's almost like preaching to the choir because they are present, but some people might just be showing back up for the first time, and challenge people in that third question, like. That's where when things get hard in your faith, don't unplug and disconnect from group, but really press into group. Because in group, that's a safe place to ask these questions, to be able to have trusted brothers or trusted sisters to be able to pray with you as you're navigating these challenging questions. And so small group leaders, just use your platform in that moment to really instill the value of small groups. And then that last question, this is where I want to encourage you, small group leaders. God has called you to leadership, and this is where it's a great time to lead people. And sometimes we got to do it in the right way, but sometimes we shy away from challenging people. And this is a good point and question to really speak into people's lives, to call them up to a higher level of commitment.
It reminds me of a conversation that I had with a guy in my group. He's been in group for 3 years, and he keeps saying, I'm new to this. I'm new to this. And I said, no, you have to change your mindset.
That's so good.
You're 3 years in. You have to think that you're not new anymore. You're just young to this.
Wow.
And so he has to see himself as that. Sometimes when you give yourself that excuse that I'm new, you limit your amount of growth. But if you can change your perspective to being, no, I'm not new to this. I'm just young in this, which means I need to learn more. I need to grow more. It becomes a motivational thing to help you really pursue Jesus. And so, these kinds of challenges is what small group is really about, where we can lovingly nudge people to really spur them on to be all that God has called and created us to be. We can't do this alone. We need one another.
Amen. And of course, it is Seek Week. So if you're not able to attend our prayer gatherings and you're doing this guide with your group, make sure you pray. You can even pray the Seek Week points, but we do have specific prayer points in relation to the sermon topic that we just went through. And I like that first one, pray for a heart that is curious. I think no matter where we're at with God, we always have to maintain that. We don't want to end up like what Nicodemus was, just a guy that knew the law but didn't really know who God was personally. And that heart of curiosity, as we see in Nicodemus's life, really allowed him to encounter the true Jesus. And so we should always have that posture.
Well, thank you so much for joining us for this week's podcast. We hope that you have a powerful time of prayer and fasting and a powerful conversation unpacking the discussion guide together. God bless you.
God bless you.